Hello, Cat Who friends, and welcome to the Cat Who Project, a podcast where we take a deep dive into Lillian Jackson Braun's world of Quill and Coco. But before we can jump in and discuss the first book, I think we need a little overview of the plot and the mysteries. So be warned, lots and lots of spoilers. But to be fair, I think all you Cat Who fans out there will already have read the book, but maybe it's been a little while, and a little refresher is just what is needed. So, The Cat Who Could Read Backwards is the first Cat Who book in a series of 29 books. It is a really important Cat Who book because we get to meet Quill and Coco for the first time, and more importantly, Quill and Coco meet for the first time and develop their relationship. The story sees Quill move to a new city because he's applied for a job at the newspaper called the Daily Fluxion. We get to learn about his accomplished career highlights, but we also come to know that Quill has gone through some difficult times, both personally and professionally, so the job at the Daily Flux is very much needed. Quill is offered and accepts a job on the art beat, and it's here that it meets up with his old friend, Arch Riker, whom he hasn't seen for quite some time. The pair seem to slide back into comfortable banter that is evident for an old established friendship. Quill is given an assignment to interview a successful artist called Cal Halape, and as he goes about learning his new beat, he attends a couple of events, The Happening and the Valentine's Ball. It's through these events that he becomes aware of various important people in the local art world, and he also meets a couple of ladies, Sandy Halape, who is Cal's wife, and Zoe Lambreth, to whom he becomes quite smitten by. But he keeps hearing about the polarising art critic who writes for the Daily Flux. His name is George Bonifield Montclemens III, and although he gives good reviews for a very select few, he mostly writes harsh and scathing reviews, so he has plenty of enemies. Montclemens is a bit of a recluse but does invite Quill to his house for dinner, and it's through this meeting that Quill meets Montclemens' cat, Coco. Montclemens offers the below apartment to Quill to rent, and Quill gratefully accepts. We know that Quill's background is in crime and investigative journalism, and he very quickly puts his sleuthing hat on to investigate when a Florentine dagger from the art gallery goes missing. And then murder. Zoe Lambreth's husband has been stabbed to death. Earl Lambreth was the director of the Lambreth Gallery, and we later find out that it's not been doing so well. Earl has been cutting costs by framing the artwork himself, and it's in his workshop and office above the gallery that someone has picked up a sharp chisel and stabbed Earl in the neck. It was described as a very wet murder. Zoe was the person who found Earl, and Quill is never 100% sure if she's guilty or innocent. And then a second murder. Nino, a junk sculpture artist, falls to his death from a great height at The Happening. What is The Happening? The Happening is a room full of people, things, sounds, and smells that seem to have no purpose and no point. Quill is very confused at first and asks what you're supposed to do. He is told that you can stand around and wait for something to happen, or you can cause things to happen, depending on your philosophy of life. And then there is a third murder. The art critic and Quill's landlord, Montclemens, is murdered at the bottom of the steps out the back of his apartment, and this, of course, makes poor Coco an orphan. Now, who was the murderer, I hear you ask? Well, I think this mystery was actually quite clever, and I've really enjoyed getting stuck into it. We need to go back to Earl and the Lambreth Gallery. So it turns out that Earl wasn't the proprietor of the gallery, he was just an employee. Montclemens was the owner and was using the gallery and his own Daily Flux art column to push an artist called Scrano. Scrano's paintings hang in the gallery and are instantly recognisable because they are always of triangle designs. Zoe describes the Scrano concept as obscene, but that the technique is flawless. The proportions, the design, the depth, superb, almost too good to be true. So who is the triangle artist Scrano? Scrano is said to be an Italian recluse hiding out in the Umbrian hills, but we never get to meet Scrano because he doesn't actually exist. Scrano is a fake artist made up by Montclemens. Montclemens has an accomplice in this scheme, a man named O. Narks, Oscar Narks. Narks is posing as Scrano's New York agent, but would frequently travel to camp out in Montclemens' hidden third apartment to paint the so-called Scrano paintings. But the triangle paintings were actually a collaboration between Narks and Montclemens. Narks painted them, but Montclemens designed them. Montclemens had lost a hand and wears a prosthetic and so couldn't paint. And Narks? Well, he had great technique, but had no creative imagination. But together and directed by Montclemens, they created artwork that was selling upwards of 5 figures. So why did Montclemens kill Earl Lambreth? Montclemens was actually running 2 books for the gallery, juggling taxes and not declaring all his income. And when Earl discovered he was having an affair with his wife Zoe, he was at the end of his tether. He threatened to expose him, and this would have landed Montclemens in jail. And why was Montclemens murdered? Well, Montclemens was actually plotting to kill his accomplice, Narks, because he knew too much. Narks had smelled a rat the night Earl was killed because he had phoned Earl early in the evening to ask him to freight more Scrano paintings to New York. But Earl had replied saying that he'd just send them along in the car with Montclemens. But Narks thinks, wait a minute, that can't be right. Montclemens should already be halfway to New York. Montclemens had, at the very last minute, told Narks to board the plane to New York using his ticket, saying that he would follow in the car. What Montclemens was actually doing was setting up his own alibi for Earl's murder because it was his name on the ticket, not Narks. Narks figured he would bribe Montclemens for a bigger cut of the money, but he was no match for the clever Montclemens. He was, however, far stronger than Montclemens and managed to easily resist a stabbing attempt and fatally turn the knife on the art critic. The final attempt of murder happened at the end of the book when Narks stumbles upon Quill in the hidden third apartment. Narks had realised that his signature was on his own robot paintings that were left in the hidden apartment, alongside some of the remaining Scrano paintings. He had decided to retrieve his robot paintings to ensure he didn't become a suspect, and at the same time grab some of the Scranos to see if he could sell them. But he stumbled upon Quill and tried to tie up this loose end. Unsuccessfully, of course. So what were some of the clues to the mysteries? Quill had noted that Earl Lambreth had dirty fingernails. As director of a supposedly successful gallery, it would be assumed that any manual labour would be delegated. And when Quill asked him, "Who makes your frames?" Earl tells him that a very talented craftsman makes them. But of course, Earl was having to do the framing himself to cut costs. Another clue, and quite a theme throughout the entire novel, is the idea that artists always add something of themselves to their artwork. For example, Cal Halape, the very wealthy commercial artist, the one that Quill is supposed to be writing a profile on, paints kids with curly hair and rosy cheeks, and he himself is described as boy-like. And Zoe, who paints abstract art in which cold eyes appear if you gaze at the painting for long enough, was herself a murky combination of innocence and cold-heartedness. And then Oscar Narks, O. Narks, an artist who was known to paint disturbingly real robots. At the end of the book, when Quill and Coco are in Montclemens' hidden third apartment, he sees Narks' robot painting, and then all of a sudden in walks Narks himself. Quill notes the square face and shoulders of Narks and thinks of the robots, and he knows instantly that this man must be the artist. Now, what about Coco and his role in solving the crimes with Quill? Indeed, Quill would not have been able to solve any of the mysteries, I don't think, if he hadn't noticed Coco's prompts. Coco was instrumental in helping Quill to actually find the hidden third vacant apartment used by Montclemens and Narks to paint the Scriano paintings. Quill had been talking with Coco and had asked him who had killed Montclemens. He said, "You're supposed to sense things." After some walking around Montclemens' apartment, Coco finally leads Quill to a wall-hanging tapestry, and Quill eventually realizes that there is something behind it, a door frame. The door leads to a staircase that would once have led to the servants' quarters. This was the hidden third apartment and the place that Narks and Montclemens created and hid the Scriano paintings. Quill thinks that there is nothing really to see in this apartment and carries Coco back up the stairs, much to Coco's annoyance. Towards the end of the book, Quill is again in Montclemens' apartment, allowing Coco some time to grieve, when Coco jumps up on the butcher's block in the kitchen and then becomes very interested in the knife block. After shooing Coco away from the knives, Quill's mustache alerts him to a clue. He realizes that one of the 5 knives is missing and comes to ponder how Montclemens might have planned to knife Narks. Montclemens must have taken the knife instead of the flashlight when he went down the steep back steps to the back patio, remembering that Montclemens only had one hand. He would have hidden behind the gate ready to take Narks by surprise. But he failed to surprise Narks, and Narks did him in instead. Quill concludes later in the book that Narks may have smelled Montclemens' trademark lime peel scent, and that this may have alerted to him that Montclemens was near. After climbing the stairs back up to the kitchen, Coco is fussing again and leads Quill back to the tapestry. They go back down to the hidden apartment, and it's now that Quill realizes that there are fewer canvases than before. Coco starts hissing and pawing at a palette knife, and Quill is trying to make sense. He turns around a canvas and realizes it's a Scriano painting. He turns more canvases around and finds more and more Scrianos. He wonders how much they would fetch, tens of thousands of dollars surely. But the biggest clue that Coco gives Quill is found in the title of the book, The Cat Who Could Read Backwards. When Quill first meets Coco, the night he goes to dinner at Montclemens' apartment, Montclemens lays down the freshly delivered newspaper on the floor and tells Quill that Coco will read the headlines. The passage reads, "The cat followed this procedure closely. His nose twitched with anticipation. His whiskers moved up and down twice. Then he lowered his head to the screamer head, which was printed in 2-inch type, and touched each letter with his nose, tracing the words, 'Always read backwards from right to left.'" And this is the quirk of Coco's that helps Quill to work out that Narks was also Scriano. The passage reads, "Coco's nose covered the surface of the painting that had caught Quill's attention. His nose moved from right to left, first tracing the O, then studying the N, moving on to the A, sniffing the R with gusto as if it was something special, and then on to the C, and finally lingering on the S. So Narks backwards becomes Scriano. Combining this with Quill's realization that the square appearance of Narks matched the square robots on the canvases made him realize that Narks was also Scriano. Finally, Coco helps to save Quill's life by alerting Quill to Narks' impending attack. But Narks is thwarted in his attempts by Coco and then Quill ties Narks up and hands him over to the police. There were a couple of false mysteries in the book. Firstly, the missing Florentine dagger from the art gallery. After quite a lot of sleuthing by Quill, it is revealed that the dagger had been found. One of the art instructors was writing a piece on Florentine art for a magazine. He had taken the dagger to examine and then put it in a safe while he attended a convention. Quill was quite disappointed by this outcome. Another false mystery was the grotto painting above Earl Lambeth's desk. grotto paintings are usually of either ballerinas or monkeys, but there is one painting that has both a ballerina and a monkey in the same composition. The painting was damaged and ripped down the middle after the war and sold separately, but it was known that if you could find the two halves and bring them together, then you would have a painting that would be worth a lot of money. Earl had the ballerina half, and it was his goal to track down and buy the other half, the monkey. It goes missing the night of his murder, and little do we know that Mont Clemens actually has the monkey half, hiding in a secret room in his house. It was actually Coco who led Quill to find this room when they were walking around Mont Clemens' apartment. This was another possibility for motive for Mont Clemens to murder Earl Lambert. But the painting is found in the stockroom of the gallery, filed under G for grotto. Another clue was when Earl was murdered. The gallery was vandalized and many of the paintings were damaged, all except those painted by Zoe Lambert and the Sgranos. And of course, this is because Mont Clemens killed Earl, but he was also having an affair with Zoe, and he was the part creator of the Sgrano paintings. Finally, the murder of Nino, the junk artist who fell to his death at the happening. This was not actually murder, it was simply an accident. Of course, there is far more to this book. This is just a summary of the mysteries, and hopefully I've got it all correct. But now that we've had an overview and a bit of a reminder of the plot and mysteries, we can move on to our deep dive into Lillian Jackson Braun's A Cat Who Could Read Backwards. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Cat Who Project. My name is Rohan, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.